Welcome to the Canadian Concussion Center's webinar series, which is sponsored by LAUNA, the Laborers International Union of North America. My name is Leslie Rattan, and I'm really pleased to be continuing to moderate our webinar series, which recur every other Tuesday evening at the same time from 6 to 7 p.m. Just so that you're aware, all of our sessions are recorded and archived. So if you're interested in looking back at any previous ones that you may have missed, you can look at the Canadian Concussion Center's website and find them there. Just before proceeding any further, we'd like to acknowledge the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we are on today. Even as we meet virtually, it's important to recognize the lands we each call home and reaffirm our commitment to improving relationships and understanding with local Indigenous peoples. From coast to coast, we honor the ancestral and unceded territories of the Inuit, Métis, and the First Nations people who call this land home. Great. So back to the webinar series. So for anyone who hasn't been here previously, each of our sessions focuses on a different aspect of concussion. And we typically have an expert speaker who opens up and speaks for the first half. And then the second half is an opportunity for you to get your questions answered. So if you do have any questions for the speaker tonight, if you just move your cursor to the bottom of the screen, you'll see that there's a Q&A. So if you have any questions, please enter them there. If you happen to be having any technical difficulties, please enter any questions into the chat and Christian can help you out there. He's also very kindly put the link in there if you're interested to the website where you can find all of our archived series. We're also, excuse me, just going to run a quick poll as we do each webinar just to get a sense of who is in the audience. So I'll just give Christian a second there. So we'll get you to fill that out. Great. So I'm really pleased tonight to welcome back Eden Dales, who's going to be presenting when and why to consult a social worker. Eden is a registered social worker and director of Eden Dales Social Work with over 20 years of clinical experience ranging across public and private practice settings. Eden has expertise in post-trauma recovery. Eden received her master's degree from Yeshiva University in New York City, where she began her career supporting clients in the emergency departments during 9/11. Eden supervises a team of therapists and offers post-trauma counseling and education and prepares assessment reports for individuals recovering from trauma. Eden offers psychoeducation and psychotherapy for those recovering from concussions and brain injuries and their families. She's an educator and has presented at national and international conferences on trauma and concussion-related topics, including female concussions. She also developed a 6-part trauma-informed care webinar accredited by the Law Society of Ontario. Eden's work extends to educating agencies, corporations, and hospitals, focusing on mental health, stress management, relationship skills, emotional intelligence, effective communication, and boundary setting. So with that, I'm really pleased to introduce Eden, and I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Leslie. So good to be here, back here. I'm just going to hide these. Okay, thank you for that beautiful introduction. So nice to be back here. I really feel very honored to be included in this group of brilliant experts. Can you hear me okay? It's good. I'm gonna.
Yes, all's good. Thanks.
Okay, great. So I will just go, and if you need to interrupt me, please do so if something's wrong. So I'm going to talk about when and why to consult a social worker after concussion, and really explain to you the vast range of support services that social workers can offer. So we are professional problem solvers, we're professional resourcers, and we are trained in a modality of support that really looks at a person in terms of all of their systems. So sorry, just to keep with my slides, I didn't even touch anything, it went forward. So Leslie did an introduction, so I don't need to do this now. But back to social work. So social workers are trained in a very non-judgmental stance, a strengths-based approach to seeing individuals for their inherent internal strengths and pulling on those, because that's really what allows human beings to heal and to recover and to repair relationships with themselves and with others. So social workers address an individual's challenges in terms of their relationship to their environment, to their systems. So we don't operate in a bubble. We operate in terms of our family relationships, our friend relationships, our leisure and hobbies, our work, our school, our religious institution, our volunteer opportunities, our community engagements. It's what we do in a day that really makes us who we are. So when those relationships with our systems are injured because of something like a concussion, social workers can really help to bridge those gaps and help reconnect with all of those different systems in ways that are healthy and effective. So we address the emotional, social, and practical challenges of recovery, offering care that extends beyond the physical injury. We help you navigate complex systems like healthcare, insurance, workplace accommodations, and education. And we provide education. And we also help empower individuals to regain control in their lives, move out of feeling like a powerless victim in this process to a powerful survivor, and adapt to new realities that maybe are hard to adapt to, but rebuild lives with a focus on dignity and strength. I'm an educator in trauma informed care, and trauma informed care is a model that is designed to train people en masse. So the idea is that everybody can learn it at every level of education. And the more people that we teach about this, the more people that can have a positive impact on individuals that are going through their recovery journey. So we recognize the prevalence of trauma, whether it be from previous trauma and concussion trauma, so compounding layers of injury, or just this new concussion trauma. We recognize the signs and symptoms of that trauma, and we respond with compassion and empathy. Social workers are your partners in problem solving. So I teach my team to treat our clients' partner problems like our own. So if it was my own problem, if I was getting calls from the CRA and I was in significant debt with the CRA, that would be a big problem, and that would cause me a lot of stress. And if I wasn't able to work because of my concussion, that would be very overwhelming for me. And so when I think about psychotherapy as part of what social workers do, I don't think that psychotherapy is really something that can be offered when somebody has the CRA calling every day, because that stress is going to be so high and so overwhelming that until we reduce those stressors, we can't really deal with the emotionality of recovering. So if I treated that problem like it was my own, then I would work it out. I would knead out the problem until it was resolved. Now, that doesn't mean that I can alleviate someone's debt, but that does mean that maybe I would sit with the individual, call the CRA with them. Maybe I would write a letter that I get, work out a plan where we can pay $25 a month for the next 10 years, and that's all we can do. And then the CRA doesn't call anymore. Well, that's reducing a stressor. So that's something social workers can do. So we work with debt, all different kinds of debt and creditors. We are not a debt relief company. We are problem solvers in that we will help advocate and educate the other party on what's going on and what we need. Empathy and action. So we are not only a witness to somebody's pain using a trauma-informed, non-judgmental lens, but we understand the emotional and practical challenges that might be mail piling up. Like I said, creditors. It might be that relationships are very strained because of concussion symptoms. Well, those have to be addressed, because we are only as healthy and happy as our healthiest and happiest people around us. I mean, boundaries help, and we do help people with self-soothing and stress reduction tools, but if you have somebody you love that's not well, that's going to impact your mood and stress level. We work using a solution-oriented approach, so we won't stop with solving the problem until there is a plan in place. So decision tree and knead out the problem until we get to something that is going to reduce the stress. Provide ongoing support so nobody feels alone in their journey. We're trained in family systems theory, which means that the family is a complex emotional unit and the family is emotionally interconnected. And when one part of the system is injured or has a concussion or is not functioning the same way, the whole system will stop functioning the same way. And we will have to learn new ways of functioning, but we must address every part of that system and nurture and care for every part of that system for the system to function as a whole. So we don't work with people in isolation from their systems or their families or their people or their problems. Um, so we help you break down problems and build them back up one step at a time. So slow down to speed up to really take things, you get very overwhelmed when people have concussions. You can get very overwhelmed with all of the different problems, and using a hierarchy of needs model. If you can't really ask about somebody's mood if they're not sure how they're going to afford groceries. So that's a problem we need to address first. And we do it compassionately, and we do it in a strengths-based way where we find strengths that have gotten you to where you are today, and we amplify those to get you where you want to go. Client-centered care is where we really prioritize the needs, goals, and values of the client and ensure the plan is tailored to that individual. So an example of client-centered care would be somebody who comes to see me and doesn't have the funds for private counseling. Well, I'm not going to convince them to find the funds to see me. I'm going to say, you know what, let's just do one session and I'm going to give you all of the ideas and resources and names that I recommend. And that's a much better use of your resources. And I encourage you to go here to get this support. So that's client-centered. What's best for the client, not what a private business would need. We kind of follow the medical model of do no harm. We take deliberate steps to avoid re-traumatization by increasing safety with clients, not adding additional stress, but instead really letting the clients lead as the experts in their own lives. We have cultural compassion, cultural understanding. We acknowledge and respect diverse cultural backgrounds of clients and hold curiosity with clients. And we ensure care is delivered with sensitivity and inclusivity. We work in the context of your environment. So we understand a client's challenge are deeply connected to their environment, and we address the systemic factors, like I said. So healing is dependent on reducing stressors. This is a model I developed years ago. When I thought about an individual who had suffered a concussion, where there's so many different problems in the mind and body and their lives, that any problem in one area would lead to problems in the others. So even if there wasn't a diagnose or an observable brain injury, they might have difficulty remembering or problem solving or initiating tasks. If they were forgetful and they kept forgetting plans, then that will affect their social relationships. If their friends aren't calling because they can't rely on them, well, then their mood's going to be crappy. If your mood's crappy and you're not sleeping because you're too anxious, well, your pain might get worse. So I find that anything in one area affects the others. And this I found was a good model to use with families that kind of sometimes say, well, you look fine. Why aren't you better yet? And that's very frustrating, of course, because nobody wants problems. So I like this model because it's a good educational tool that any one of these problems can show up at any point in the recovery. And everything has a residual effect. So concussion affecting work performance can lead to financial strain, and then family stress because of the anxiety of the financial distress. And then you might face having to move and pack up a home. I mean, these are the practical issues that we really look at as the contributing factors to the stress. Also, we look at the clients in terms of all of their systems. So helping people function well. And I call it dealing with your crap, because if we don't deal with our crap, then unexpressed emotions do not go away. They come back in much uglier ways. That was Carl Jung who said that. But it's very true. And it's very important that I think it was Carl Jung. I've checked on that. But it's very important that we recognize that if something's not working, get some help to address it. So if your relationships are suffering, um, avoidance will only prolong them from getting better. And if you're able to access services, the Toronto Distress Line, your local distress line, the Brain Injury Society, these are great places with trained individuals that will have the knowledge and skills to be able to help you work through some of these challenges. And sometimes just expressing emotions and talking about problems, even journaling is a form of expression. So even starting by journaling right away, you're starting to express your emotions. But these are the systems we need functioning well for people to live a healing life. And so we use therapeutic communication. We have no judgments at all. We create a healing environment. And we model self-care and self-compassion. So how do you find a social worker? So findasocialworker.ca. You can search by language and region. Those are usually private social workers. But again, if you reach out to if somebody reaches out to me and they don't have the benefits or funds, then I might do one session with them, which can be extremely helpful, because if you pick your top 3 or 4 problems and bring it to a social worker, they'll give you specific advice that you might not have thought of. Community agencies, your local brain injury association, absolutely. They have such great programs. They raise a lot of funds for programming to run for people that don't have benefits or private program. The Trauma Resource Directory is excellent. A referral from your family doctor, psychiatrist, if you have a lawyer, an insurance claim, or from a healthcare provider. Early social work intervention after trauma is key. So we know that unaddressed emotions do not go away. They come back in much uglier ways. And the uglier ways might look like misery stabilizers, like overspending, or uh, any sort of high risk behavior leading into more severe forms such as addiction. But we got to find some way to express that distress that we have. And so the longer we wait to understand how this trauma impacts us, the more at risk we are for those unhealthy ways of coping. Now, you can't recover until you're ready. But sometimes getting the education, like coming to these kind of things, is so important, because you'll pick up things that will stay with you, and it makes your job easier in trying to express to your family why you're struggling. It's easier to explain when you don't have to work so hard to be understood for your distress. And also, it's important that you know different aspects of functioning and how trauma can impact different areas of your life. So when it does happen, you're not like, what? Something's wrong with me. You're, oh, yeah, they said that might happen. It really, really helps family members, and it helps individuals to know all the different ways that you might be impacted, so you're prepared for it and how to handle it. Emotions aren't problems to solve. They're not crises. They're just emotions. But somebody telling you that is really important. If you don't know that, then you might feel really sad in the afternoon and think you've got a new problem to deal with. Now, of course, if it's repeated, it has to be addressed by a doctor. But I think professionals can really reduce your fear around symptoms being frightening versus typical for what you're experiencing and manageable. Um, so bringing awareness to how trauma can impact you, like I said, um, having one conversation with a skilled social worker who's compassionate and validating and supportive will drastically improve coping, because just as repeated stressful events in a relationship um, create layers of hurt and injury, repeated positive interactions with a skilled social worker will heal repeatedly. And so it works the same way. Um, Mindfulness and structure is a winning combination that social workers use. And we help you prepare for future challenges and transitions in life stages when symptoms tend to reappear. So we advocate. There was a client years ago that had uh, she had a concussion. She also had a history of significant impulsivity that got much worse after her concussion. And she got her disability check, and she went to a jewelry store and she spent it all. And a family member called and said, "Oh no, she's not well. And can we please have the money back?" And they said, "Well, we don't do refunds." And that's it. And I said, "Excuse me?" And I wrote a letter to this jewelry store and I said, "What kind of business do you want to be? You've been told this person has a mental health problem and physical illness. You've been told that this was uh, funds were released in error, and our government has invested so much money and effort in educating businesses and people about mental health and injuries and disabilities." Anyway, they had the money back. But that's the kind of advocacy, treating the problem like our own, that, that's an extreme situation, but educating from a place of knowledge and certainty and confidence is one of the great aspects of social workers. We help facilitate, so facilitating relationships, facilitating if somebody is very depressed and they come to see me, tell them right away that they should be volunteering alongside coming to see me, because there's something called the helper's high. And when you help other people, something happens in your brain, it changes, the chemicals change in your brain, and you can, no pill can do what helping others does. So I will facilitate somebody in a volunteer position as they're working with me. Or I will facilitate them to join a group. We educate families, individuals on the whole range of how they can be impacted by concussions, and we will help negotiate things like debt, or if somebody leaves school because they got so overwhelmed that they didn't even know how to ask for help, and the avalanche started going, they put their hands in the air and they just did nothing. And then a few years later, they come to see me and say, "Okay, I'm ready to heal. Oh, but I can't go back to university because I left and I never even dropped out." So we'll go back 5 years and we'll get the transcript reversed. So now it's not a fail, it's just a they never went. So that helps tremendously, because if they didn't have the skills or the support to even ask for help, then they never were able to do that. But it's not impossible. I've done it many times. And then we work on the lost income from school. So all of these problems are just things we have to work out bit by bit. Um, so certainly, we are not, we're not, well, I'm not a crisis worker. Most community social workers are not crisis workers. Crises need to be handled by inpatient care or distress, by calling 911 or going to the emergency room. Social workers do not talk about medication. They do not recommend medication. They do not name medication. The most I would ever say is you should go see your doctor. Social workers are mandatory reporters. So if somebody has has heightened distress and is at risk for hurting themselves or others, or has thoughts that are frightening to them, we will have to ensure that they get emergency care, because we are mandatory reporters. So sometimes, but it's not just that somebody would have scary thoughts and I'd call 911. It would be a discussion with the family. We make a safety plan. There's a whole process that social workers can do. But if somebody is in significant distress or suicidal, they need to go to the emergency department. And some red flags indicating that social work should start right after concussion would be new or existing mental health problems. So social workers can work beautifully alongside psychologists and psychiatrists. Significant mood changes, increased stress, difficulty certainly with parenting or marriage, problems regulating emotions, relationship changes and challenges, social isolation. Really, really important to seek support, or intense conflict with your family or friends, decreased interest in other people or activities, difficulty problem solving, stressful life events or challenges with decision making, executive functioning, focus, or inhibition. And these are some warning signs. I didn't say at the beginning, I apologize. I have way more slides than I'm going to get through. I do that purposefully. You guys are all here learning about social work. So I give you those as resources and tools that you can go through on your own slowly. I think they are all very easy to understand. And if they're not, my email is at the back and you are free to reach out to me. So these are some other red flags. And do not wait to reach out to a social worker. We move beyond we see the person beyond the problem. So we problem-based thinking is what we work with. We are solution oriented in our approach. And, we know that pre-concussion challenges will be amplified post-concussion. So, there's compounding layers of injury. Like if you break your leg and you're on crutches and you fall and you crack your jaw, your leg doesn't stop hurting. So if you had ADHD or a learning disability or a mood disorder or a chronic pain illness before your injury, well, they don't go away. They just become more amplified because everything hurts more. So we help families to understand that, and we help people cope with those kind of challenges the best that they can. We help people reframe negative uh, patterned thinking with alternative thoughts. But again, that kind of psychotherapy, in my opinion, is best done when stressors are calmer. So if somebody doesn't know where they're going to sleep at night, it's certainly not a time to do CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. That would be a time to help them find a place to sleep. We want to increase positive interactions at home and in different systems, and maintain hope for healing, positive change. I'll just do this quickly. So this is one of my favorite models, the anger iceberg. When somebody is very angry, and that can happen after concussion, it's usually not like the core emotion. It's usually something that's going on underneath the anger and all of these other unnamed emotions. Working on emotional literacy is really important in healing, being able to name the emotion you're feeling and know that it's just a feeling and it will pass. We help people, like I said, with mindfulness and structure. And state dependent functioning is really the idea that we can't learn when we're stressed, we can't problem solve when we're stressed, and we're not effective when we're stressed. So in order to help people, we have to kind of move up the brain. So the bottom brain is like reptilian brain. That's where the fight, flight, freeze, stress response is. And we have to help people regulate their nervous system. So regulate meaning taking a walk around the block, doing some deep breathing, eating something, drinking something, putting cold water on the back of your neck, on your chest, on your face, shocking your internal environment, going outside, changing the air you're breathing, changing your external environment, progressive muscle relaxation, anything that's going to shock your internal system into a new, calm your nervous system. So you move up the brain. And so that's regulate. And then up beyond regulate is relate. So that's when we can help people know they're not alone and we're here with them. And then at the very top, where executive function is, where the frontal lobes are, that's where the reasoning, the problem solving, and all the good stuff happens. And that's where we can reason. So state dependent functioning, if I'm really stressed, I'm in my bottom brain, I'm in no position to problem solve or work things out or repair or figure out a problem. I just need to reset my nervous system. And you can help other people by co-regulating, by saying, let's go outside, let's get a cold drink, here's a cold cloth, let's have something to eat. You don't try and talk them out of their distress. You just acknowledge whatever they're saying. Then we're moving up. You're not alone. And then, okay, now do you want to talk about the problem? So that's a really important tool. So here we go, the brainstem. So this is where, and I gave you a lot of shocking your system activities. So there's all different things you can do. You can, anything rhythmic, put on music, drumming, anything that's moving into your body. We start feeling stress in the body, we sweat, our heart rate goes up, can't swallow, your hands might be sweaty, you might feel shaky, you might feel tired. All number of things can happen when you're distressed. We have to heal it in the body first. We can't calm panic with changing our thoughts. It's actually going to exacerbate our panic because it won't work. These are some cognitive distortions, like I said, the unhelpful thinking styles that we help to reframe, help people to, once they're calm, if they can try something different. There's some little models in here. I put some stuff in here because I've had a lot of clients over the holidays, over the years, that are very worried about their loved ones or themselves with frightening thoughts. Suicidality is something, like I said, that needs to be addressed in the emergency department. Absolutely. Somebody calls me and says, I'm suicidal. That is not a client. I would be irresponsible and unethical and really unfair for me to even get involved. They need to go right to the emergency department. But when people have periods where they feel frightened by their thoughts, or you feel worried about somebody you care about, it's good to learn as much as you can about it, because then the more information you have, the more prepared you'll be to support them. So here are some risk factors for suicidality. Again, this is not to take matters into your own hands and assess somebody or treat somebody at all. This is for you to understand suicidality. But again, it needs to be addressed in the emergency department. Now, what I will say is when clients are waiting for a very long time to get a psychiatry referral and they're struggling, I mean, our system is so overloaded, we have to use it differently. I do recommend that people go to the emergency department and use it as a triage, because if you do go and you can get a letter from somebody like a family doctor, even if it happens periodically, just to say they recommended they come, or even if you don't have a letter and you're able to say, I get these frightening thoughts, or I'm here with my loved one and they feel like sometimes they don't want to live, or they're frightening me, you will end up meeting with a psychiatrist or a psych resident. You will end up being assessed, and you'll likely, well, I don't know what's going to happen, but if somebody is sent home, they are usually referred to the psychiatry clinic at that hospital within the next 2 to 4 weeks. So I find that is the only way sometimes to get to see a psychiatrist. And whether it's the appropriate use of the system or not, it's what I tell people: to take care of yourself and do what you can to get the support you need. So there's some other information here about suicide, some information about programs that are running. There's other things we can do as social workers. We apply for tax credits. You need to do that properly with the right professional. Um, I do 1 session social work, which can be extremely effective, even for psychotherapy. And this is a great grounding model. I'm going to stop. It's past 6:30, so I'm going to stop. Like I said, you can go through the things on your own, but this is my favorite grounding model. Hungry, angry, lonely, tired. Meet all 4 needs before you try and reason with yourself or others. And we can stop there.
Great. Thank you so much, Eden. So much great information in there. And yeah, I've had the pleasure of working with many social workers over the years at Toronto Rehab, and it's always been, fantastic in terms of working collaboratively within the team. So thank you for all of that. We do have a few questions. A couple of them actually relate to cost. So someone is asking, are your services covered by OHIP?
My services are not covered by OHIP. You're probably going to see a social worker. If it's a master's level social worker, it's going to be probably between $150 to $200 an hour. But a social worker that works in a community agency like Brain Injury Society, your local Brain Injury Society, or if you call it a distress line, those are covered services that are intended to provide support when you reach out. But no, our system is not designed to offer covered individual therapy through OHIP. No.
Yeah, it's discrepant. I mean, I have heard of some social workers being part of family health teams now. Are there more of those?
So if you have a family doctor, then they
Yeah,
might very well have a social worker affiliated that you get 6 to 8 sessions, I think.
yeah.
Um, and that's I think the it starts with the family doctor that usually will know what their program will cover, and then there's different programs that are covered under the government, right? So if you have any cardiac issues, you can get covered for a block of treatment. If you have a brain injury or concussion, you can get covered through the your local society for their services, right? It's not individual, but there's some doctors that offer psychotherapy. But let's be honest, I mean,
Mhm.
it's very hard to find covered therapy. That's
Yeah.
why I'm giving you a lot of psychotherapy tools and resources, a lot. I'm offering you, things to look through and really consider how much you can manage on your own, and then seeing where you can fill in um, that little bit from your family doctor. And the I think knowing what it is that you're needing, like I said, if you went to the emergency, if you're really struggling with mood changes after concussion and you're waiting to see a psychiatrist and you do what I said, you take a stab at it and you go to the emergency and you say, look, I am really in distress. I really am not coping. I'm frightened a lot of the time. And you meet with a psychiatrist and you get an appointment, well, that might open up a team that you are able to get services from, right? Like an outpatient psychiatry department is going to have a social worker. They're going to have different kinds of crisis workers. They might have a team that offers you crisis support. I don't know, but I know that everything is program based. So the more you can, right, the more you can kind of be creative and get connected to a funded program. It might have a support group, might have a peer group, it might have different things that you're not aware of that you're not having at home right now.
Hmm. Hmm. For sure. Thank you. Do you deal with people who are on WSIB and are in the process of trying to get their claim approved?
I have in the past. I mean, I write letters of support, and I certainly can help with anybody in any navigating any problem with very, very strong disclaimers that I can only do what I know how to do, which is identify what the challenges are, what I'm recommending. I don't know what happens. Of course, have no control. Um, but that would be a great social worker would be a great person to go to if you're trying to get benefits approved, because we are trained in preparing letters to different organizations, government, public and private organizations, to get our needs met in a way that might be a little more streamlined and effective.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay.
Right, a lawyer is not going to have that kind of mental health um, knowledge and advocacy.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Someone is asking, does Eden only work in Ontario or can she work in BC? If you only work in Ontario, do you know of any good social workers in BC that you could recommend? Or do you have any suggestions if someone's looking for a social worker generally? Is there?
Yeah, so our college is very strict. We're only allowed to practice in Ontario with people in Ontario. I've had clients move out to BC and you have to register. It's a whole other system there.
Mhm.
It actually is a whole other system there, the way things are funded. I just did spend time finding somebody in Alberta for somebody, but BC, I don't. One of my social workers actually was in Vancouver, so um, I can ask, but I would probably start with like the brain injury services in BC and see who they recommend, because they probably have similar listserv to. what we have in Ontario, like find a social worker. They probably have something like that.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, so I don't know anybody myself, but um, yeah,
great.
sorry.
Yeah, thanks. Um, for a single session, so it sounds like if someone is only able to come in for a single session, what would you suggest if the needs of the individual are complex? So,
Well, I mean, I don't know what the needs are,
yeah.
so I don't know what I would suggest, but I think that single session, meaning that I would give a whole boatload of resources to go and read on your own if possible. Or I'd probably triage, like, maybe you should try the emergency room, like I said, or maybe you should try this agency that has a new program for young people, or maybe, I'd suggest you focus on one problem right now. And until that's resolved, try and shelf the other ones, or even giving some tools for stress management and regulating, like I said, might help unlock the gates of creativity, right? Problem solving requires us to be creative. We can't be creative and do things differently if we can't get up to that thinking part of our brain. So, even teaching some very simple grounding techniques that, showing that I believe that those will work, that might even help in calming you enough that you can start to read the stuff and make more sense of it and be creative. I think people forget how resilient they are. Human beings are incredibly resilient and capable of doing amazing things. So I think we forget when we feel in pain and when we feel sad and we feel broken, I think we forget how much we can really manage.
Thank you. Are social workers good to work with if there are marital problems after a concussion, even if it's
I
been a
mean,
couple of years?
I think definitely, because the relationship problems are the result of the problems that we have in, like, my relation, me to me, then me to one, then me to many, right? So if my internal thinking and feeling is distressed, then it's going to be hard to be around. It's going to be hard to relate to others. So, it starts with um helping people have compassion for their partner, even in the face of, people in need of the most support and care are sorry, the people that behave in the most unlikable ways are in need of the most support and care. So when we are in distress and when we are hurting, we tend to project it to others. And it's hard to have compassion and empathy for somebody you care about when they're behaving in a way that's hard to be around. So helping people have compassion for each other and understand one another better, and helping kind of not over pathologize the concussion as the only thing that we're dealing with, but these are two people in a marriage that, there's a lot to work with there. And the concussion symptoms can certainly get in the way, but I think there's a lot of education we can do. I don't think it's effective to work with people without addressing the marital challenges, because that's such a big part of your life that you
Mhm.
come here and it feels good, and then you go home and it doesn't feel good. Well, that's not going to work.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, this is a tough one. So someone is asking about housing. It sounds like they have seen several social workers in hospital, rehab general, um, and they hear there's a very long wait list indeed
Yeah.
in terms of finding housing, housing crisis, um, even shelters. And I'm so sorry to hear this. They're actually saying that they are homeless right now. Um, yeah, can you comment on sort of assisting
Well,
people with
first of
that
all,
here?
I don't blame you for having zero confidence, and I'm very sorry that you have dealt with this, and I don't have a good answer for you. There is 10-year wait list for housing. Um, Social workers are not magicians. We cannot we're fighting against the same system. I mean, I'm suggesting people use the emergency as a triage when they're not necessarily actively suicidal. I'm sure I'd get a lot of criticism for that, but this is like a kind of desperate measures situation. So the most I would have as well would be shelters. The most I would offer as well would be local brain injury societies, which you are entitled to if you have a TBI. Um, it's yeah, the housing crisis is really, really difficult. I mean, if you are able to connect with a local brain injury society and be part of a group there and meet some people and have some consistent connections, that might help to alleviate the isolation from homelessness. I mean, I wish I had a better answer, but I don't know if the Brain Injury Society that is local to you would have a different list of shelters that maybe have more awareness of brain injuries. I don't
Mhm.
know, but I applaud you for being here and for
Yeah,
doing as much as you can for your own health and safety.
absolutely. Yeah, thank you for that. Someone else is asking how to keep, so any recommendations on how to keep organized and keep notes when one feels so overwhelmed, and it sounds like they're losing things and just, yeah, cognitively having some difficulties.
I mean, I think that's probably a good question for an OT, which I'm sure is part of this webinar. But I think that in terms of executive function, if you're too stressed, then it's going to be hard to stay organized and to stay on top of things, but slowing way down, maybe managing expectations. So you tell the people around you that, you know, you tend to forget things and lose things. So you have a little more wiggle room to not feel so pressured to be places on time or to deliver expectations. That's one good tip. Another, you know, good another good thing is to not have a million places where you keep notes. So have only one place, whether it's in your phone or whether it's one pad, and that's the only place, and you carry it with you all the time, and then you can't lose it. I think if you can get some Apple AirTags, I don't know if you have any of those, but that's good for important items. I always write down at a pad at the front of my house where I leave things so I know that they're there. Having a place for things that is non-negotiable. If you make things non-negotiable, like your keys go in the key bowl, no matter what, no matter how tired you are, it's a non-negotiable. Your credit card goes back in your wallet, it's a non-negotiable. Those kind of things do help because it's not negotiable and you will have to do it. And that's your list of things to do before you go to bed and you have it right there and you make sure you get up and go do those things.
Mhm. Yeah, those are
I mean,
great,
that can help. Yeah.
great suggestions. Um, just one more comment on that, and this actually ties in. There was one more comment, I think, really probably voicing some frustration about the inability to access services.
Mhm.
When you can't afford it, and the individuals saying as well, many individuals that have had a traumatic brain injury concussion aren't able to work, which makes it even more challenging. And unless you have coverage or you've been in a motor vehicle accident, you have some benefits, it can be really difficult. But just to let people know, at Toronto Rehab, where I work, we have something called the Tele Rehab Center for ABI, and this was started in Dr. Robin Green's lab, and we offer um, groups. So it's not individual, but it's all virtual. The goal was really to sort of broaden services for people who aren't necessarily in Toronto. But we actually do have one of the groups, and this is what made me think of it, called goal management training. And so it's very much focused on helping us with our executive functioning, which is exactly what this individual is speaking about. So you can look that up. The Tele Rehab Center. You do need a referral from your family physician, but it is entirely free. And then there are groups and things like, just concussion education, but also mindfulness, cognitive behavioral therapy, goal management training. Um, yeah, so just another resource
That's
that
great.
is out
There's
there.
also just on that, not a group. I mean, there's a lot of groups now running through the local brain injury associations and also through Obaya. But there's also CAMH has a new virtual emergency. And I encourage people to try it because, again, you might be connected to a registered nurse or um, a volunteer that is supporting those efforts before you speak to a psychiatrist. But these programs are really designed, again, to reach, like like Dr. Rutan said, like designed to reach many, many people in different areas, not catchment based. And having those single session conversations, whether it's a distress line, a virtual emergency, a telehealth line. I mean, these are all trained individuals answering these phones. And you might find that you learn one thing that helps you with one problem. So if those notes are no longer a major problem, then you're able to move on and start to slowly build up your repertoire of skills to handle and cope with all of the things that are problems and have a more creative way of approaching them. I mean, there is, like I said, there is no magic to solve the fact that social work is not covered. I mean,
Mhm.
it's very frustrating, and I and yeah, it's very, very upsetting. But hopefully the resources in that I'm giving you will help with that stress management, will help with boundary setting and relationships. Even just a little shift can make things a lot easier on a day-to-day basis.
Mhm. Absolutely. Um, I think we have covered all of the questions. So if anyone has any, I think we're actually ahead of time, a little bit ahead of time. So if anyone has any other questions, you can put them in the Q&A.
Mhm.
But Eden, I just want to thank you again for returning and presenting again. It's great to have you. Um, and just to let you know, as always, there will be a very short survey that comes your way. And so we always encourage people to complete that. And if you do have any questions that you think of after that you didn't get answered, you can include those in the survey. I always just remind people though that they're anonymous. So if you want us to get back to you, please just include your email address, and that way we can reach out. Our next session and our last one before the holidays is in 2 weeks. We actually do have an occupational therapist, Leslie Burkett, is going to be with us, and she's going to be presenting return to work, vocational rehabilitation, and occupational therapy. And I think that's it. Yeah, we just have a thank you from Lily. Thank you very much. So, yeah, thanks again, Eden, and thanks everyone for attending tonight. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.